The fog came in thick from the Atlantic, so dense that even the familiar curve of the harbor seemed strange. Lanterns burned dull halos above the pier, their light unable to reach the water. Mateo Ortega tightened his coat against the salt wind and walked the planks with careful steps, hearing the creak of swollen wood beneath his boots. He had gone down to check the moorings before dawn, nothing more. That was when he saw him. The figure stood at the far end of the dock, still as a piling. For a moment Mateo thought it was a fisherman waiting for tide, but the shape was wrong, too rigid as if it had grown out of the fog itself. As Mateo drew closer, the stranger turned. The face struck him like a blow. It was his own. His own nose, his own jaw, though heavier, more lined. The hair was thinner, the eyes rimmed with a fatigue Mateo had not yet earned. "¿Quién eres?" Mateo demanded, his throat tightening. The man's voice was slow, almost reluctant. "Soy tú dentro de 20 años." Mateo staggered back a step, boots scraping the planks. "Mentira," he spat. His hands went to the coiled rope at his belt as though it might serve as a weapon. "Trickster. Doppelganger." The gulls, roused by his shout, wheeled and screamed overhead. Before he could demand more, the sea itself shuddered. Not with the rhythm of waves, but with a sound like a long throat clearing, deep, resonant, rolling up from beneath the black water. The dock groaned as though pulled downward by some hidden weight. Lanterns swung wildly. Mateo clutched a piling for balance. From the depths, a glow pulsed. Not steady like a lamp, but quickening as if answering the groan. The water convulsed, spraying salt across Mateo's face. Then silence, so absolute that even the gulls fell mute. The older Mateo spoke again, barely audible. "Alos ya están aquí." Mateo turned, expecting ships, monsters, anything at all. The fog thinned in patches, and he caught glimpses of impossible shapes beneath the waves, shadows like arches, curving in angles the sea had no right to hold. They shifted, not swimming but rearranging themselves, as though the ocean were folding to let them pass. One shape surged closer. The dock heaved upward, throwing Mateo to his knees. He scrambled, clutching at the boards as water exploded through the gaps. For an instant he saw it, a tendril of liquid light, braided like kelp but rigid as steel, sliding back into the depths. Mateo's heart hammered. What was that?" he shouted. The older self did not move. He only watched Mateo, eyes hollow, voice breaking. "El principio de lo que no puedes evitar." Mateo staggered to his feet, soaked with spray. He wanted to strike the man, to shake answers out of him. But another groan rose from the water, closer, angrier, and instinct hurled Mateo back from the pier. Boards split behind him with a crack like thunder, and a surge of luminous foam hissed through the broken wood before vanishing into the sea again. Panting, salt in his mouth, Mateo stared at the stranger, his stranger, who remained untouched at the end of the dock, framed by fog and ruin. Morning broke with pale sunlight, strained through veils of mist. The storm surge smell still clung to the harbor, salt, tar, and the faint reek of fish left too long in broken crates. Mateo climbed the hill toward the village square, his clothes still damp from the night before. His mind reeled with what he had seen, the double of himself, the pulsing lights, the tendril of living water. He had told Carmen, his sister, before she left to barter bread. She laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Un borracho, nothing more. You fall asleep at the dock and dream ghosts of yourself. And now the sea groans like an ox? Don't speak such things in the plaza, Mateo. You'll only give them reason to laugh." But when he reached the square, he found the whispers had already arrived ahead of him. Fishermen gathered near the fountain, sleeves rolled up, faces pinched. Women crossed themselves as they passed the chapel, muttering about the Mar Embrujada. Old Senora Estevez told anyone who would listen that she had heard iron whales singing beneath the waves. A boy dragged in a net tangled with shards of something slick and colorless, no fish, no shell, but a substance that caught the sun like oil on water, then dimmed as though embarrassed by its own glow. The alcalde, Don Rafael, waved the boy away and tried to hush the gossip. "It is drift, nothing more. Foreign rubbish. The sea carries everything, even madness." But his voice lacked conviction, and his eyes darted often toward the horizon. Mateo stood among them, silent, the taste of truth burning his tongue. He wanted to shout, "I saw it. I saw myself, and I saw the sea tear open beneath us." But he held back. He knew his neighbors. In a village of 200 souls, nothing was more dangerous than being marked as mad. Carmen returned, arms heavy with bread, and shot him a warning glance. "Not here," her eyes said. Yet suspicion had already begun to turn its wheel. Old Jacinto, a net mender with a face like dried leather, spat on the cobblestones and jabbed a finger toward Matteo. He was at the dock last night, see? And now the boards are split, half the moorings gone. He brings bad omens, this one. Murmurs rose. Men crossed their arms. Women pulled children close. A few nodded in grim agreement. Matteo felt the circle tightening, the invisible rope of their doubt coiling around his neck. He opened his mouth to protest when the bell of the chapel rang, not once, not for prayer, but thrice in uneven strokes. A boy ran breathless into the plaza. "The sea," he cried. "It has left, Prince." They rushed to the shore together, a ragged procession. There, stretched across the wet sand, lay vast impressions. Not letters, not drawings, but arcs and folds too immense for any human hand. They shimmered faintly as though heat rose from within them, though the morning was cool. Children reached out to touch the patterns, but their mothers pulled them back, shrieking. The alcalde ordered the crowd away, but no one moved. The patterns were not still, they shifted slowly, grain by grain, as though the beach itself was breathing. Matteo's heart clenched. He remembered the luminous tendril and the older man's warning, "Allos ya están aquí." Beside him, Carmen whispered, voice trembling, "Maybe you did not dream, hermano." And behind her words, in the restless hush of the villagers, Matteo heard a new note, fear sharpening into something else, the hunger to find someone to blame. That night the fog thickened once more, and Matteo found himself drawn back to the broken dock, as though the splintered boards called his name. The sea was calm, unnaturally so, its surface glassy, reflecting the pale moon in trembling shards. He told himself he would not go, yet his feet carried him anyway along the same path, past the chapel, past the shuttered tavern, until the salt air filled his lungs. The stranger was there again. He stood at the edge of the pier where the wood had cracked under the surge. His posture was patient, almost humble, hands folded before him. In lantern light, Matteo saw details more clearly, the scar above the right eyebrow, the stiffness in the left leg, the gray threaded through his hair. They were things Matteo did not yet have, but might. Matteo's anger flared. "If you are me, prove it. Tell me what I dream when I am alone. Tell me the thoughts I've never spoken." The older man did not answer directly. Instead he said, "Do you know how fishermen test a net? They do not ask it to be perfect. They throw it into the sea and see if it holds against the weight of water. That is how life proves us, by strain, not by ease." Matteo clenched his fists. "Parables. Always riddles. I don't need wisdom from a ghost." "You asked me for truth," the stranger replied softly. "But truth is not spoken whole. It is netting, Matteo, and every knot holds a piece. Some are strong, some unravel." The words unsettled him more than if the man had shouted. The sea gave a quiet pulse then, a low thrum beneath the planks. Matteo crouched, peering into the water. Shapes stirred just below the surface, long, pale, sinuous. He glimpsed movement not like fish, not like any beast he knew, but a weaving, an interlacing of light with current. When he looked again, nothing remained but darkness. "You see them too," Matteo whispered. The older self inclined his head. "They are not strangers to this world. They have always been here. Only now do they show themselves because time has thinned enough for them to slip through." Matteo's breath caught. "And what do they want?" The man smiled, though his eyes did not. "Do you ask what the tide wants when it rises? Or the gulls when they circle? Want is a word for people, not for them." Matteo's patience snapped. He surged forward, grabbing the man's collar, shoving him back against a piling. "Then why me? Why wear my face? Why torment me with riddles?" The man did not resist. His expression was weary, as though he had known the grip before. "Because you will decide," he said. "And because I once stood where you stand now, thinking I could refuse the weight. But the tide pulled me all the same." Matteo's grip faltered. He released the collar, stepping back, chest heaving. His own breath came ragged against the night air. Behind them, the sea whispered again. For a heartbeat, Matteo thought he saw a figure rising from the water, tall, faceless, dripping with a glow of plankton. It did not climb onto the dock but remained half-formed as if waiting for permission. When Matteo blinked, the fog swallowed it whole. The stranger did not turn to look. He only said, "Tomorrow the village will begin to choose. Some by faith, some by fear. You must know your heart before theirs demands it." And then he walked into the mist, leaving Matteo alone with the sound of the sea and the ache of questions that bit deeper than answers ever could. Matteo returned from the dock before dawn, his boots leaving a trail of wet sand across the kitchen tiles. The lantern Carmen had left burning was guttering low, filling the room with the faint smell of oil. She sat at the table with her arms folded, bread untouched before her, watching him as though she had been waiting all night. You went back, she said flatly. Matteo closed the door with care, as though noise itself might betray him. He did not answer. I know you, Carmen went on. When something gnaws at you, you chew it raw until nothing remains. You've been chewing since yesterday. Tell me what you found. Matteo hesitated, but the silence pressed against him. He was there. Again. At the dock. Carmen's expression flickered, first concern, then irritation. The drunkard you spoke of? No, Matteo leaned forward, palms on the table. Carmen, it's me. His face, mine only older. He speaks as though he carries all my memories, as though he knows what will happen before I do. He says I will decide something for all of us. Carmen's mouth tightened. You sound like a man who has been too long at sea without sleep. You think I want this? Matteo's voice cracked. I wanted to fix the nets, to haul fish, to live as always. But the sea has changed, Carmen. It breathes. It leaves marks. I've seen them. She stood, suddenly restless, pushing the chair back against the tiles. And now you see yourself walking out of the mist. Tell me, Hermano, do you expect me to believe this is not the madness that already haunts the old men in the tavern? Her words stung more than laughter would have. He slammed his fist against the table, rattling the lamp. He knows things, Carmen. He told me about you. She froze. What about me? Matteo's breath slowed. He had not meant to speak of it. But the memory of the man's calm voice returned. Your sister will leave. Your sister carries a truth she has hidden even from you. He said you're planning to go, Matteo whispered. Leave the village. And that? He stopped himself, but the air between them thickened. Carmen's face hardened into stone. So this phantom of yours tells you my secrets now? How convenient. Matteo shook his head, desperate. I didn't ask him. He spoke it as if to wound me. And it was true, wasn't it? The silence answered him. Carmen turned away, gathering her shawl with shaking hands. You've brought this on yourself, Matteo. Whatever you saw or think you saw, don't put it on me. I have my reasons for leaving, but I won't have them used as proof of your ghost. She moved toward the door. Before stepping out, she added, softer but sharper, be careful who hears you speak of this. A man who sees doubles is a man no one trusts. The door shut behind her, and the house felt suddenly larger, emptier. Matteo sank into the chair, staring at the bread between them that neither had eaten. Outside, the gulls cried at the shore. Somewhere beneath the sound of wings, he thought he heard again that low, throbbing groan from the sea. The morning tide brought wreckage. Matteo was on the beach when the fishermen returned, dragging their boats half empty. Their nets were shredded, strands dangling like entrails. Fish lay twisted among the holes as if they had been pierced not by teeth, but by sharp edges, clean, metallic. One man cursed, holding up a fragment tangled in the hemp. It was no hook, no shell, no coral. The piece curved smoothly, colorless at first, then caught the light and shimmered with a strange translucence, as though it borrowed the hues of whatever touched it. Sky, sea, human skin. The men muttered prayers. Women gathered, whispering Malda Ojo, Cosas del Demonio. Even Don Raphael, who prided himself on steady reason, looked pale as he held the fragment between cautious fingers. It bends like reed, but it does not break, he said quietly. It is no metal, I know. No wood either. Matteo stepped forward, his voice sharp. You see it now. Proof. This is what I told you. All eyes turned toward him. Some with curiosity, some with suspicion. Carmen pushed through the crowd, her shawl tight around her shoulders. Matteo, not now, she hissed. But he would not be silent. You doubted me when I spoke of the dock. You called it madness. Look at their nets. Look at what the sea has thrown back. He snatched the fragment from Don Raphael's hand, holding it high. The thing pulsed faintly in his grip, a rhythm like a heartbeat, making the villagers recoil. The old net mender Jacinto spat into the sand. You see? He touches it as if it belongs to him. Maybe it does. Murmurs rose, sharper now. Bad omen. Accursed man. Matteo's chest tightened, but he forced himself to speak louder. You think I summon this? I tell you, the sea is not empty. Something beneath it moves, and we are blind if we deny it. Last night I saw. He caught himself, the words choking in his throat. Do I tell them? Do I name the double? Carmen's hand gripped his arm like a warning. Enough, she said, her voice trembling but fierce. If you want to destroy yourself, fine, but don't drag us all into your madness. Matteo wrenched free, but her eyes held him, and for a moment he faltered. He saw the fear there, not only of the villagers' judgment but of him. Before another word could be spoken, a boy cried out. He had been poking at the sand near the waterline. The crowd turned. There, half buried in wet grit, lay more fragments, longer, curved, humming faintly. One of them shifted on its own, writhing as though alive, then stilled again. The crowd gasped and stepped back. Matteo stared, heart pounding. The pieces were not just wreckage. They were parts of something larger, something that had moved through the nets and broken them as if testing their strength. Not drift, Don Raphael whispered hoarsely. Not rubbish. Something from below. The villagers began to cross themselves. Some gathered stones. Others whispered prayers. And Matteo, holding the shimmering shard in his hand, felt torn between vindication and dread. For though he had proof at last, the proof was more terrifying than any suspicion. Carmen's voice was low but steady at his side. If you are right, hermano, then we are all in danger. The sea groaned again, deep, resonant, like a drumbeat felt through the bones. By dusk, the village stood restless. Nets lay drying in tatters, the strange fragments locked inside the chapel as if sacred or accursed. Don Raphael ordered calm, but his words scattered like gulls in a storm. Mothers barred doors, men sharpened old blades, and children whispered of glowing whales that walked on land. Matteo lingered at the pier, restless, the shard he had hidden burning cold against his chest. He told himself he would not return to the broken boards. Yet the sea drew him as it always did. And then the water stirred. At first it seemed a trick of the tide, long shadows beneath the surface wavering with the waves. But the shapes did not ebb with the current. They grew, lengthened, rose. The sea heaved, and from it emerged tall figures, 6, maybe 7, each limbed but fluid as though sculpted from shifting streams of light. Their forms bent and reformed, silhouettes that never settled, clothed in a pale glow of plankton fire. The villagers cried out. Some fled inland, others ran toward the shore, torches raised. The bell of the chapel tolled without command, its uneven ringing thick with dread. Atroce. Don Raphael shouted, his voice breaking. Hold the line. The beings did not advance quickly. They moved with deliberate grace, touching the shallows, pausing to let the surf wash against their limbs. One knelt, if kneeling it was, and pressed a shining hand into the sand. Where it touched, the grains fused, glassy and smooth as if fire had passed through them without flame. Dios nos libra, an old woman whispered, clutching her rosary. Matteo's heart pounded. The sight was both terrifying and beautiful, like watching lightning walk on legs. And then, through the fog, another figure stepped onto the pier, the older Matteo. His face was lined with urgency. He raised a hand not toward the beings, but toward the villagers who pressed forward with rocks, knives, and hooks. If you strike them, he called, voice carrying above the surf, you destroy us all. The crowd wavered. Jacinto spat. He sides with them. Look at him, he is no fisherman now but a prophet of shadows. A torch flared and arced toward the nearest being. It struck the figure's chest and fizzled out, the flame extinguished without smoke. The being did not flinch, only tilted its head in a gesture too slow, too measured to be human. In answer, the sea gave another groan, deeper this time, shaking the sand underfoot. Waves crashed high, pulling 2 men into the foam before spitting them back, coughing, terrified. The being stood unmoved, silent, watching. The future Matteo's voice cut through the chaos, sharper than the bell. You are afraid, but they do not come to devour you. They come to witness. If you make war, you will not win, you will only hasten the end. Matteo, standing among his neighbors, felt torn in two. The faces around him twisted with fear, ready to follow Jacinto into violence. Yet the words of his double struck like truth. If these creatures had wanted destruction, they would already have torn the village apart. One of the beings extended an arm, not a hand but a column of translucent strands, weaving like water through reeds. It stopped a few paces from the villagers, waiting as if offering a choice. Torches flickered. Stones trembled in fists. Matteo stepped forward, chest tight, every nerve alive. He did not know whether he meant to shield his people from the beings, or the beings from his people. Only that his own heart demanded he move before the first blow fell. The plaza spilled onto the beach in a clamor of shouts and torchlight. The line between villagers and beings narrowed, only the trembling surf between them. Torches hissed in the damp air, knives glinted, old iron polished on whetstones too quickly. Children clung to their mothers' skirts, their wide eyes darting between the glowing figures and the men they had always trusted to protect them. Matteo felt the fear rise around him like another tide. It was not only fear of the beings but of each other. Fear sharpening into anger, anger reaching for blood. Jacinto strode forward, torch high. If they are not here to harm us, why do they come in silence like thieves? Why do they crawl from the water like ghosts? We must drive them back. A chorus of agreement followed. Stones were hefted, spears leveled. The beings remained motionless. Their forms shifted slowly, each curve of light folding and refolding, as if they were studying the humans as one might study an unfamiliar script. No hostility showed, but no retreat either. Mateo's double, the older version of himself, stood at the pier's edge, his gaze fixed not on the villagers but on Mateo. His eyes seemed to say, "This is your moment." Mateo's throat was dry, but his voice rose above the din. "Stop. Listen to yourselves. Do you not see? They've had every chance to strike us, yet they have not. You throw fire and they do nothing. What if they are not our enemy? Then what are they?" someone shouted. Mateo faltered. He had no answer. The beings shifted again, and for a heartbeat, their forms echoed human shapes, tall figures with arms and shoulders, but always dissolving back into fluid arcs. The sight unsettled the crowd further. Jacinto snarled. "You defend them because you belong to them. First you see doubles, now you speak like their tongue. You would betray us, Mateo Ortega." The torch in Jacinto's hand wavered, ready to be hurled. The crowd pressed forward with him, fear tightening into violence. Mateo moved before he thought. He stepped between Jacinto and the nearest being, spreading his arms wide. "You'll strike me first, then. If you believe I am cursed, kill me now. But if you harm them, you may call down something you cannot imagine." A hush followed, sharp and sudden. The surf hissed at their feet. Torches sputtered. Even the gulls were silent. Jacinto's face twisted, torn between rage and doubt. His arm trembled, the torchlight painting his cheeks red. For a long moment the village hung on his decision, whether fire would fly or be dropped into the sand. Behind Mateo, one of the beings lifted its arm. Light streamed outward, not as a weapon but as a glow that washed over the crowd. It was cool, not burning, a pale radiance that stilled hands and slowed breath. The villagers blinked as though waking from a nightmare. The torch slipped from Jacinto's grasp and hissed into the tide. The beings stepped back, returning to the shallows, their glow dimming but not vanishing. They waited there, present, patient, like a tide that would not retreat. Mateo's double finally spoke, his voice carrying over the water. "You chose not to strike. Remember this. Every choice from now will matter more." Mateo felt the villagers' eyes on him, heavy as chains. In their gaze was confusion, suspicion, and something worse, expectation. He had placed himself between them and the unknown, and now he would be the measure by which they judged what came next. The night after the standoff, the village lay hushed but not at peace. Doors barred early, whispers curled under rooftops, and even the sea seemed muted, as if it too weighed the cost of what had been seen. Mateo could not sleep. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw Jacinto's torch suspended in midair, ready to fall, ready to burn. He left his bed before dawn and wandered toward the pier. There, as if waiting, the older version of himself sat on a coil of rope, his coat heavy with salt. But they were not alone. Carmen stood a few paces away, her arms crossed, her stance rigid. She had come before him. Her voice cut sharp through the fog. "You say you are Mateo, older. That is true, then you know me. Tell me who I am." The stranger looked at her, his eyes softened by something Mateo could not name. "You are Carmen Fernandez, daughter of Antonio who drowned off seas when you were 10. You carry the nets your mother taught you to weave. You carry more than that, though you hide it." Carmen's jaw tightened. "You repeat stories anyone might know. Words traded in taverns." The stranger rose slowly, his face carved in weariness. "No tavern knows the mark behind your shoulder, shaped like a crescent. No gossip knows of the letters you write and never send, addressed to the father you pretend to have forgotten." Carmen flinched, color flooding her cheeks. Mateo stepped forward, startled. "How could you?" The stranger silenced him with a glance. His voice lowered, carrying the weight of tides. "She already knows. She has always known. But you must learn what silence costs." Carmen's fists balled. "And what gives you the right? You stand here in his shape, but you are not him. If you were Mateo, you would keep my trust, not use it like a knife." For the first time, anger lit the stranger's voice. "It is not betrayal to name the truth. The beings in the sea do not lie, not even in their silence. If you hide from each other, how will you face them? How will you survive what is coming?" The gulls wheeled above them, crying in agitation as if echoing the storm in Carmen's face. She turned on Mateo, her eyes blazing. And you? Do you believe him? Do you think I am a liar, that my life is a secret ledger to be read out loud? Mateo opened his mouth but words failed. He looked between her and the stranger, his double, and felt a fracture widen within him. Both demanded loyalty, yet neither offered him ground firm enough to stand. The stranger stepped closer to Carmen. His voice softened, tinged with sorrow. I tell you this not to wound you. I tell you because when the sea beings call you, you must answer. And you will. For you, Carmen, are the bridge they seek. Her eyes widened, and for an instant the fire in her faltered, fear crept in. She turned abruptly, retreating toward the village. Mateo called after her. Carmen. But she did not slow. Only her voice drifted back through the fog. If you let him speak for you, Mateo, then you are already lost. The fog thickened, swallowing her figure. Mateo turned on his double, fury mixing with dread. Why her? Why involve her in this? The stranger's reply was quiet, almost a whisper. Because in every thread of time she matters more than you can yet see. The gulls scattered, shrieking as though startled by what had just been spoken. Morning broke with a pale, colorless light that failed to warm the village. Fishermen moved in uneasy silence, their eyes averted from the waves. Women gathered at the well but did not gossip, as though speech itself might call the beings ashore again. Only the gulls cried, sharp and restless. Mateo found Carmen repairing a net outside her cottage. Her hands worked fast but not with their usual precision. Knots twisted wrong, lines pulled too tight. Carmen, he said softly. She did not look up. If you've come to defend him, leave me to my work. I didn't know he would speak your secrets. I didn't want that. Her hands stilled, fingers clenched around the twine. But you let him. You stood there, silent, while he undressed me before the sea. Mateo winced. I was stunned. He has my face, my voice. Hearing him was like hearing myself, someone I might become. I didn't know which of us I was supposed to defend. Carmen finally lifted her eyes, hard and glistening. You defend what matters to you. If you had chosen me, there'd be no question. Her words struck deep, but before Mateo could answer, a sound drifted from the shore, low, resonant, almost like a hum carried through stone. Both turned toward it instinctively. From the cliffs, pale glimmers pulsed in the surf, slow and deliberate. The beings had returned, watching from the tide. Carmen's breath caught. For a moment her anger dissolved, replaced by something Mateo could not name, longing, recognition, maybe even a strange relief. She took a step toward the shore. Mateo caught her arm. No. Stay away. She shook him off. Do you not feel it? They are calling. They are dangerous, he said. Even if they mean no harm, the villagers won't forgive you if you go near them. She laughed bitterly. The villagers? You mean Jacinto and his torches? Let him burn. He does not matter. You do. Mateo's voice cracked with urgency. You matter more than anyone. If you go to them, they'll say you've betrayed us. And maybe, he faltered, maybe they'll be right. Carmen's face softened, but only slightly. Do you hear yourself, Mateo? You sound like them. Afraid. Always afraid. Yet when I look at the sea, I feel. She stopped herself, biting the words back. Mateo stepped closer. What do you feel? Her silence was answer enough. She turned away, eyes fixed on the water's glow. The hum deepened. The waves lapped higher, curling closer to the sand as though reaching for her feet. Carmen's body leaned forward unconsciously. Mateo seized her shoulders, forcing her to face him. Carmen, listen to me. I don't know what they want, but I know this. If you give yourself to them, I'll lose you. And I can't. His words broke, tangled with fear. She studied him for a long moment. The fire in her eyes was no longer only anger, it was conflict, sorrow, something larger pulling her away. You may have to lose me, she whispered. Because maybe I was never truly yours to keep. Mateo released her, stunned. The net in her lap slipped, unraveling across the ground. From the tide, the beings pulsed again as though echoing her words. By midday the plaza was thick with voices. Smoke from cooking fires clung to the air, but no one tasted food. People gathered in knots, whispering fiercely, glancing toward the sea and then toward Carmen's cottage. The air carried the unease of a trial before it had even been declared. Mateo arrived to find Jacinto already at the center, gesturing wide with his hands, his words sharp as knives. We all saw it. She was drawn to them, pulled like iron to a magnet. And who among us heard the hum before she stirred? Who but Carmen? A murmur rippled through the crowd. Mothers clutched their children tighter as if Carmen herself were contagious. Carmen stood at the edge of the circle, shoulders squared, chin raised. She did not deny it, but her silence only fed the whispers. The alcalde stepped forward, his presence stiff but cautious. Enough of rumor. We have lived beside storms and famine. We do not turn against each other lightly. Yet Jacinto is not the only one who saw her. Carmen, tell us now, what do you know of these beings? All eyes fell on her. Even Mateo felt the weight of expectation pressing in, though his heart ached with the memory of their earlier argument. Carmen's voice was steady, though her hands trembled. I know no more than you. But I will not pretend not to feel them. When they rise from the sea, they resonate. It is not evil. It is not deceit. It is presence, and it calls to me. That is all. The crowd stirred uneasily. Jacinto sneered. Do you hear? She admits it. She confesses their pull. Today she stands on the sand, tomorrow she'll lead them through our doors. No. Mateo shouted, forcing himself into the circle. She is no traitor. She is as much a daughter of this village as any of you. You think the sea does not call to all of us? Our lives are tied to it. We live by its gifts, die by its storms. Carmen only feels what we all fear to name. But his words did little to soften the suspicion. An old woman spat on the ground. The sea has taken too much from us already. If it now sends voices into her heart, then she is marked. Others echoed the thought, their whispers swelling like a tide. Mateo's double appeared then, silent at the edge of the crowd. His gaze did not waver from Carmen. He spoke only once, but it cut through the noise. Mark her if you must. But know this, she is marked by what will decide whether you live or vanish. If you cast her out, you cast away your only chance. The words landed heavy, a weight no one wanted but none could ignore. The villagers drew back, muttering, some making the sign of the cross. The alcalde raised his hand for silence. This cannot be decided in a frenzy. We will meet again tonight. Until then, Carmen, you remain among us, but you do not leave our sight. Carmen's face was pale, but her back stayed straight. She glanced once at Mateo, her eyes unreadable, and then let herself be escorted away by two neighbors who watched her as one might watch a wolf. Mateo felt the fracture deepen, between Carmen and the village, between Carmen and himself, even between his two selves. And above it all, he sensed the beings in the sea, waiting with the patience of tides, their glow faint but steady against the horizon. They kept Carmen in the old boathouse, the one with warped planks that had once held the fleet's nets and barrels. Now it was bare save for a rope tied across the doors, a gesture more symbolic than secure. Two men sat outside with torches, though their eyes betrayed unease. No one wanted to guard her, yet no one dared refuse. Mateo paced the shore nearby, his thoughts clashing louder than the waves. He had begged the alcalde for her release, but the answer was always the same: until the vote is cast, she stays. His double had not intervened, only watched with a sorrow that felt heavier than accusation. Carmen sat inside on an upturned crate, her hair loose around her face. Through the gaps in the wall she could see the sea, and it shimmered faintly with pale light. She pressed her palm against the wood, as though the planks might dissolve if she willed it. Then came the hum. It was softer this time, not the resonant quake that had unsettled the whole village, but a thread, intimate and low, slipping through cracks and into her chest. She gasped. The sound seemed to speak not to her ears but to her bones. Her vision swam and she saw, not with her eyes, but as if projected within her, a shore of endless night where the beings gathered in silence. They parted, and in their midst a single figure formed, shaped more clearly human than before, a tall shape with eyes that glowed like phosphorescent surf. It lifted its hand and Carmen's heart surged. She felt both terror and longing, the pull of a tide she could not resist. Come, the voice whispered, not in words but in the pulse of her blood. She stumbled to her feet, pressing against the wall. The guards outside shifted uneasily, hearing the scrape of wood. She moves, one muttered. She stirs like she hears them. Inside, Carmen whispered into the planks. What are you? Why me? The figure in her vision tilted its head. She felt rather than heard its answer. You are the bridge. Through you they may know us without fear. Without you they will drown in their own fire. Her knees weakened. She sank back to the crate, tears rising unbidden. At that moment the doors rattled. Mateo slipped inside, ignoring the startled protests of the guards. His face was pale in the torchlight. Carmen, he whispered. They'll vote tonight. Jacinto's whipping them into a frenzy. If it comes to exile. She shook her head, cutting him off. It won't matter what they decide. The sea has already chosen. Matteo knelt before her, grasping her hands. Don't say that. Don't give yourself to them. Her gaze softened, but it was distant, as though she were already half elsewhere. Matteo, I don't have the power to give or deny. They will come whether I step forward or not. But if I do nothing, their voices will be lost. And yours may be silenced with them. He searched her eyes, desperate for the woman he knew, not the figure the sea had marked. If you go to them, the village will see only betrayal. Then perhaps betrayal is the only truth left, she said quietly. A surge crashed against the boathouse, spraying through the gaps. The guards outside cursed, stumbling back. Pale light spilled across the sand, brighter than before. The beings were closer, their glow reflecting off every wet stone. Matteo's double appeared in the doorway, framed by the torches. His voice was calm but heavy. It begins tonight. The sea will not wait for the alcalde's vote. The boathouse shuddered as if the tide itself had claimed it. The alcalde's hall overflowed with bodies and voices. Smoke from tallow lamps clung to the rafters, thick with tension. Every face was turned toward the alcalde, who stood at the long table with Jacinto at his side, lips curled into a predator's smile. The question is simple, the alcalde declared. Carmen Fernandez is no longer trusted. Do we exile her to save ourselves, or do we bind her here and wait for ruin? A roar rose from the crowd, some shouting exile, others muttering dissent. Knives and fists struck the table. The hall quaked with the noise of a people tearing themselves apart. Then, before the alcalde could call for a vote, the ground trembled. A low resonance surged through the stones, rattling pewter cups, shaking the walls. Lamps flickered. The villagers fell silent as one, their ears straining. Outside, gulls screamed, wheeling in frenzied arcs. A boy burst through the doors, breathless. The sea. They're here. The lights, they cover the whole shore. Panic spilled into the hall. Men snatched torches, women pulled children close. The alcalde shouted for order, but his voice was drowned by the rush of feet. Matteo pushed through the press, his eyes searching for Carmen. He found her at the far wall, flanked by her guards. Her face was pale but calm, as though she had expected this moment all her life. The crowd surged toward the shore. Torches flared against the night, forming a jagged line along the tide. And there they were, the sea beings risen in greater number than ever before. The surf itself glowed, each wave cresting with pale fire. Their shapes blurred, sometimes human, sometimes fluid arcs of light, sometimes unrecognizable. The air throbbed with their hum, steady and inexorable. The villagers froze, torn between awe and terror. Jacinto stepped forward, torch raised high. See? They come to claim her. This is proof enough, she has betrayed us. Carmen wrenched free from her guards. No. Her voice cut across the beach, clear as a bell. She faced the crowd, then the sea. They have not harmed us. We are the ones who bring fire and knives. If you strike them, you strike yourselves. Jacinto sneered. You defend them still. Then go to them and may the tide take you. He hurled his torch toward the water. It arced through the dark and landed with a hiss, sparks sputtering into smoke. The nearest being shimmered, folding into itself, then unfurling with a flare of light that rippled across the waves. The hum grew louder, shaking the villagers to their knees. Matteo's double stepped forward, placing himself between Carmen and the crowd. His voice rang out, the choice is not theirs. It is hers. All eyes turned to Carmen. The glow of the sea reflected in her eyes, making them shine unnaturally bright. Matteo's heart pounded. He forced himself to move, to reach her side. Carmen, don't. If you cross to them, I cannot follow. The village will not forgive. I will not. I cannot lose you. She turned to him, sorrow softening her features. You never had me to lose, Matteo. Not truly. I was never only yours. The beings pulsed again, their forms opening like a path of light across the surf. The call vibrated through every bone. Carmen took a step toward the water. The villagers cried out, some begging her to stop, others urging her exile. The alcalde shouted commands lost in the roar of waves. Matteo reached for her hand, but she pulled gently free. Trust me, she whispered. And then she walked into the surf. The glow enveloped her, rising around her like a second skin. The beings folded closer, but not to devour, rather to receive. Her figure blurred into their radiance until she was no longer wholly separate, no longer wholly human. The tide rose, carrying her forward. The villagers fell back in terror, some crossing themselves, others fleeing. Jacinto stumbled to his knees, his torch forgotten. Mateo stood frozen at the water's edge, salt spray on his lips, watching the woman he loved dissolve into something beyond reach. His double's hand settled briefly on his shoulder. "She was always the bridge," the older voice murmured. "And you are the witness." The tide surged once more, then ebbed. The glow receded, leaving only dark water. Carmen was gone. The beach was silent but for the waves. No one spoke. Mateo remained, staring at the horizon, where faint glimmers still pulsed far out at sea, an unfinished language written in light. Seasons turned, but the night of Carmen's crossing never faded. The village spoke of it only in whispers, like a wound pressed too often. Some claimed she had drowned and been taken by the sea, nothing more. Others swore she had transformed, joined the beings as one of them. Children grew up with her name half curse, half prayer. Jacinto never raised his voice so boldly again. He carried in his eyes the look of a man who had seen his own power dissolve like salt water. The alcalde ruled more cautiously, always wary of the tide, but his decrees carried less force than before. The sea had humbled them all. Mateo lived on, but not as before. He still fished, still walked the docks, but his gaze lingered always on the horizon. He spoke little, for every word seemed inadequate. His double remained for a time, watching, advising, urging patience. But one dawn he was gone, leaving no trace but the memory of his weary eyes. On quiet nights, Mateo returned to the pier. He swore the waves bore traces of Carmen's voice, woven in the rhythm of the surf. Sometimes the glow returned, faint and far off, a shimmer like moonlight submerged beneath leagues of dark water. The villagers learned to live with the silence between tides, but they no longer trusted it. Nets were cast with prayers, children were warned never to walk the beach alone. And yet, beneath the fear, something else endured. The memory of a woman who had stepped into the sea not in terror but in choice. Years later, when storms broke and left wreckage on the sand, some swore they saw footprints that glowed faintly before the tide erased them. They whispered her name then, not as exile, not as traitor, but as something stranger, harder to define. Carmen Fernandez. The bridge. The vanished. The tide's daughter. And Mateo, standing on the pier, whispered back to the horizon. "I am still here." The waves answered as they always had, in their endless, unknowable tongue.